Folks, welcome. How is everybody doing? Listen, this is a bonus episode that I'm doing because I woke up. Well, I usually wake up, but I wake up and then I check my phone almost immediately, which they always tell you not to do. And I truly believe that is the right way to go. But I look at my phone and then I'm inundated with something that immediately usually gets me upset, angry, that kind of thing. You know, how your phone is designed to make you feel. And I usually check Instagram first, and then then my day begins. And this week, or in the past week, we've had two podcast episodes of a new podcast. Well, it's not new per se, but it's free now, and it's the Bravo Hot Mic podcast, hosted by Alex Baskin, who is also the executive producer. I believe he runs Evolution Media that produces Beverly Hills, Vanderpump, OC, and now he also I think his production company is 32 Flavors as well, which produces The Valley. And I'm sure there are going to be tons of other shows coming out of there, but he hosts this podcast, right? And so it was behind a paywall for the last year and, had amazing guests. And I think I said at the time, that the unfortunate thing is putting this behind a paywall because one or two people will take the information and then kind of throw it out for everybody. So I'm so glad with these last two episodes, they have removed the paywall, and you can see how it immediately supercharged that podcast if you geek out about things like that, like I do. So it's like number one on Spotify and Apple Podcasts in terms of TV and film. And listen, Alex Baskin, it's almost like taking performance enhancing drugs. I mean, it produces the shows. He has access to the best guests. Are you kidding me? He had Brittany and Jax on back to back at one of the most tumultuous times of their lives. And I always crack up. I mean, don't cry. This is not funny at all, but we used to say Jax and Britt, and now we're starting to say Jax versus Britt or Britt versus Jax because they both have very different takes on their situation. Now, right out of the gate, no matter how charming he is, no matter whatever you want to say, the unfortunate thing for Jax of having us seen his behavior over these last 13 years is that he has been a proven liar time and time again. And it seems like potentially now is no different. Jax and Brittany are already firing shots out against each other on social media about this interview that was just released with Jax. So we're going to talk. We're going to go through the transcripts of both of these podcasts and see if we can make heads or tails. But it's unfortunate because I think Jax is so damn charming and he makes so much sense when he talks, but you also then have to discount, I would say, a good 70% of what he says just because, I think he perceives things to be in a way that's way different, or he takes things that are happening and kind of maneuvers them in such a way to make him look like the victim in this situation. Now, divorce is hard on anybody. Separation is hard on anybody that has gone through it. Shout out to Freddie Mellencamp. She's going through something like this right now, which we'll probably talk about on the Pop Culture Roundup on Monday with Sophie. But, unfortunately with Jax, you just got to really keep in mind all of the past behavior, right? And so Brittany must be pulling her damn hair out, but also at the same time trying to still play that game as well of airing a lot of these things out in social media, which I guess maybe financially works for a time because your name is out there in the press. That's sometimes my least favorite part of pop culture is just the constant not negativity, but the fact that wouldn't you want to be talked about just in the things of like the good that you're doing or the things that really get you excited? And that's what happens with reality shows and reality stars is that their life is the product. Their life is the content. So when things take a hard left and a bad left, that's when it's like, woo, we're out there. Let's get these brand deals, baby. Let's open a new bar. Let's this, that, and this. And all of a sudden you ride this wave of weird popularity that I can imagine is frustrating at the end of the day. But at the same time, I do question sometimes wondering, if they enjoy it at the same time. Like, I don't think Sandoval obviously enjoyed most of Scandival, but I think there is residual effects that you're like, okay, well, my name's out here on this, my name's out there on that, because otherwise you're really dependent on the release cycle of the actual shows that they're a part of. Now, before we get into that, I wanted to talk about this Demois. Demois had Thea D'Souza on Your Moms Are Watching, and I'm reading some of the bullet points from one of my favorite Instagram accounts, Vanderpod Recaps. And also, I want to let you guys know that they have a podcast now called Recap Rodeo. So go check that out if you are looking for new content. I love their Instagram account so much. I don't get a chance to listen to all of these. Like, I'll make exceptions for something like Jackson Britt, or there were certain episodes of Rachel Goes Rogue, or, I'll listen to special ones. But for the most part, I catch up with accounts like this. And I guess Thea is coming with this information. And, I always say across the board, not just with this, but across the board, take everything with a grain of salt. It's like listening to Jax Taylor. We'll know when we know. And I've always held true to the fact that there will be another season. It might not look like what you're expecting, but there will be one, just because there is money involved, and that's good and bad. Because Bravo wants to make their money, but as I think they talked about in this interview on the Do You podcast, is that, and I do agree with this. I mean, listen, I don't think it takes any insider information to realize that the budget on this season is going to be potentially a lot more than seasons prior, just because of the success of it. So how, the Hollywood system works is your client is in something that's really successful, right? And then you're not on some new contract, or they don't have you locked down on a contract. So then you say, you know what? We definitely want to come back, but we want a 30% increase on our salary. Now, a lot of these cast members, some of them, in seasons past, they haven't been even series regulars, which means they get, guaranteed a lump sum no matter how many episodes they're in. There have been certain cast members, I've talked about this on the show before, that they would do pay to play, where they'd be day player rates. Like, for every episode that, say, Sheena's in, she would get this much money. And it's, I think it's kind of a motivator for some of these people to make sure they are involved in the drama so they can keep showing up. But I don't know the status of these individual contracts. And, with movie stars, or back in the day, they would have performance like bonuses. Like, if a movie made $300 million at the domestic box office, you would get like a 20% bonus. There would be insane money given. Reality shows work a lot differently, right? And the reason why there are so many reality shows is that usually, or in decades past, these things have been cheap to produce, because it's not supposed to be stars involved. They're supposed to be real people. But when you have a show like Vanderpump, that it would be entering its 12th season and coming off the last couple of seasons where they've been part of a weird national conversation, there's a lot of demand. And usually production companies think, well, you can make up that money with brand deals, right? Like, even new cast members on Vanderpump Rules, I know this for a fact, going like back 2 or 3 seasons, they were offering a pittance for new cast members, because they really were like, you can make that money back on social media. And they're not wrong. But for anybody that thinks they line up the Brinks trucks, that's not how cable networks work. MTV was one of the first ones. Like, MTV was not throwing money at anybody back in the day. I think sometimes when I was growing up, I'd be like, wow, they're millionaires. Oh my God, Pimp My Ride. Oh, Exhibit must be a billionaire by now. And that's just not the case, because you're trying to turn a quick buck and you're trying to produce these things as cheaply as possible. So in this Do You interview, Thea is saying that she knows, or has heard, that they are going to reduce the shooting schedule, and it's only going to be 3 weeks of filming as opposed to the normal 3 months, and that they're going to start filming in mid-January. I just was with Sheena on Monday. I think our episode of Shenanigans comes out tomorrow. I don't know. I'm not sure. But it is funny because later in this interview as well, Dumois reads a blind item saying Sheena didn't tip at the Chargers game, which Sheena's already then came out and said, no, I tipped $50 at an open bar. Are you kidding me? And we do talk about the Chargers game on the episode of Shenanigans, not in regards to tipping. So I don't know if that will actually make it in. I also do believe Sheena is, I mean, I've seen Sheena in action. She's extremely nice to everybody. And I don't believe that she's a bad tipper. I just don't. That's a, for as much as I've seen her pay for things, I just don't believe that. But who knows? Who knows, right? But I stand with Sheena on that part of things. But also, I asked Sheena on and off mic about the next season of Vanderpump, right? Like, and here's the deal. She was very honest. Like, of course I'm going to come back if they do it. I want to be back. Yes. There was no like hidden games of like, we'll see what they're offering. No, Sheena started Vanderpump Rules, and I think it's only fitting if she finishes Vanderpump Rules. That's why if last season was the final season, I feel like it should have gone out on a Sheena talking head, just because that's how we entered season 1 of Vanderpump Rules, which, by the way, covering season 2 of Vanderpump Rules over on the Patreon, and it is so wild. There's so many little details you forget, and especially watching Jax deal with this breakup with Stassi, he just keeps getting himself in the same patterns again and again and again. And it is wild to think, 12, 13 years later, and there's not been a lot that's changed except for tax brackets. So, this interview, she seems to know that this is the case. So I don't know if that means that Thea is then the source for like the US Sun article that were coming out or articles. I think, you have to be really careful. I think this time, the scheduling of Vanderpump Rules has changed again and again and again for this next season. We've been hearing so many things. But also, Sheena doesn't have the best poker face in the world. I think I was talking to Danny Pellegrino about that this week. I think that was on the show, or maybe it was off. Maybe it was just when we were talking beforehand. She didn't have a good poker face, and Sheena usually likes to be like, well, I know this, and she didn't do any of that. And I didn't feel like she was trying to, like, the thing that I felt she was potentially a little dodgy on was how big of a part she plays in the Valley season 2 this season, right? So that is the new information that potentially mid-January for 3 weeks. Now, if it is only a 3-week shooting period, I'm begging Alex Baskin, if you are listening, I'm begging you to use my idea where you trap all of them in some sort of house. Fuck it. Close down SUR for 3 weeks and make them live there. Make it like Big Brother, where they are forced to just be at SUR. And then at the end of the day, they should just walk out the SUR alley in like slow-mo with like the slow, like, raise your glass version of this song playing, and then they should just light fire to SUR. Like, they should just burn it down, baby. Like, that's the dream finale. You lock them in SUR for 3 weeks, not serving customers or anything. Lock them in through the 3 weeks, and then open the door, let them walk out, and then just Lisa like, oh, it's time to set fire to SUR. I can't believe Lisa set fire to SUR. I can't believe that. Oh. That's my dream ending, is just, set it all up in flames. I don't know. We'll see. 3 weeks. I just, because she's saying 3 weeks because that will actually reduce the salaries because they wouldn't have such a high overhead for 3 weeks. Plus, we do know that they're pushing to potentially get a new cast in there for maybe an offshoot of Vanderpump Rules. I don't know about that, but there have been so many false stories out there too, like that they were pushing Lisa Vanderpump out of the way, trying to get her out of it. And I will tell you, I, I'm all for less Lisa in Vanderpump Rules. My dream would have Lisa to be at Beverly Hills. And also, Lisa has the second season of Vanderpump Villa, which is already wrapped shooting, which will star Miss Nastasia Stassi Schroeder. So Lisa has things, but I just don't think there's any world in which it would be a Lisa-free final season. I don't think her ego would allow it, nor do I think the fan. I mean, like, she's got to be there. I mean, like, if it's going to be a supposed final season, she's got to be there. But I would just urge everybody, information's exciting. It's really, really fun to speculate and to say, I heard this, I heard that. but just take everything you hear in this space with a grain of salt, right? You've got to, like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Everybody's coming back, but it's only going to be for 3 weeks. I mean, I'm just going through my head of how much content and what that would look like with only 3 weeks. And, if that's the case, I mean, it should just be like a retrospective where they all sit around and comment on previous seasons or something, because I don't know. Obviously the Valley is like the spiritual sequel to Vanderpump Rules. So I don't think there's necessarily a passing of the baton, a passing of the torch to the Valley, but in some ways I do feel comforted that the Valley I'm an old man going, I feel comforted that there is the Valley, because you can continue on with any of these people's stories. And the fact that Jax and Brittany on this Hot Mic podcast, the fact that they are where they are right now just shows that even if the cameras are down, the chaos in their reality show filled lives goes on, right? It's just if cameras will be there to catch anything. But right now, Jax and Brittany, both live wires. Both live wires. I was DMing with Alex Baskin this morning, and which I'm very excited about. Hopefully, I can get Alex one day to come on this podcast, because he truly is a dream interview of mine. I don't know how much he would ever be able to say, but he was posting hot mic clips, and I said, I love I'm such a wussy and I have no balls most of the time, but I said, hey, this is what I was like, hey, let me pitch you an idea. This is what you need to do. You need to take clips of this podcast with Brittany and the podcast with Jax, and you start the season of Valley, the season 2, with these clips. And then you do that thing that we see in all the reality shows where then they like, and they rewind. And then we see the start of the season like 4 or 5 months earlier. So we already know, because, now that they've done these interviews and we've seen them in the press these last couple of weeks, we know that it doesn't end well, right? So I feel like with these podcast interviews, you show them that they're at odds with each other. They are speaking potentially ill of each other. And then you flash back to the beginning of the Valley season part 2. I think it would be the perfect way to start a season. So I told him this, and he was like, he was laughing, that's laughing over Instagram. Ha 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 ha. He was laughing, and then he said, well, he goes, don't worry, it already starts with a bang. And I'm like, the dude knows what he's doing, but I would imagine this is where my imagination goes, how hard it's got to be a producer on one of these shows, because it's all about not letting the air out of the bag, creating that dramatic tension, not creating it, but making sure the dramatic tension that's real in these people's lives. How do you capture it? And how do you not let it dissipate? Like, how do you let it get to a fever pitch without it going overboard? There are so many things that I think would just keep me up late at night. I mean, I'm already being kept up late at night thinking about it. I don't even get paid for it, but I would think that is the goal of like walking this tightrope of, can you get these people to trust production enough to really reveal things? And Jax, just really does take carte blanche in feeling free enough to seemingly lie again and again and again and again, even though, Brittany will come back and immediately like, he's lying, y'all. He's not. What are you talking about? And I have to say, I believe Brittany. And I do want to point out too, I mean, I think we're all, hopefully most of us are caring, feeling people. Obviously, Jax has been going through something potentially his whole life. And I do have hope that he can pull through whatever this is, but it just sometimes doesn't look good, right? It doesn't look good. And when you're a caged animal, you're going to swipe out at anything out there. And you're also going to perceive everything to be negative against you. When I don't think it's people, I think genuinely people want Jax to be okay to some degree, right? But I think all of that is perceived as negativity towards him, is like, they're the enemies within those people, and it's like, dude, we want you to continue to get help and figure it out for yourself. And because he knows, you can talk to him and he'll tell you pretty eloquently the issues that he deals with, but then it doesn't seem like he deals with those actual issues. So he's cognizant of them, but then it seems like the The follow through is where it's missing. Right? Okay, so that is our opening statement on this. So let's dig into this. We're going to start with Brittany's podcast or Brittany's interview with Alex Baskin first. And we'll go from there. Okay. Okay. So with Brittany's, it starts off just talking about how good they were potentially going into that first season of The Valley. And she thought they were going to be this really strong couple and it was going to be them against the world and they were going to be there for each other. And it was going to be about our family, their family and their friend group. And she said they found out we were opening the bar right before the season started. So a lot was happening in their lives. And Alex is like, how do you think the show factored into that? Do you think that it accelerated things sort of going downhill, or what do you think happened? And Brittany says, well, that's hard to pinpoint, but we had been arguing and fighting for a while. It's not like it only happened because we started filming, but I do think the extra pressures and different things that come along with it, they get to Jax differently than a lot of people would handle things. He cares a lot about what you look like on the outside, which is very Jax. I think that's what we've seen. He also presents a very different image on social media, very caring. He'll use religious iconography, a lot of different things because, you know, I mean, it's hard to post like, I'm in a fucking shit mood. I mean, he would argue with people on Twitter all the time, which is where they would end up getting blocked. But I mean, we see that kind of vacillating wildly, right? From like really cool, really great guy to fuck. But she says he's like that type of person. So she says he didn't want me talking about us fighting or anything like that. He would get angry with me if I had conversations with my close friends about our relationship. So that's an interesting thing too. And we're seeing that a little bit with the podcaster Brianna Chicken Fry and the country singer Zach Bryan, right? About very possessive and very worried about the conversations happening about him or them to outside people. He wanted to be in control of that relationship. But what did I say, you guys that have been with me even before The Valley started airing? I just said, what a potential mistake, because you're going to piss away this relationship. It just happens. And especially, you know, studying a creature like Jax over the last decade, you know, just it's you just see that it's not going to be good for them. It might be good financially, but it's not going to be good for the thing that hopefully you want, you know, when you're 70 and 80, which is a relationship that's lasted a lifetime. So she said she was never allowed to vent. And of course, when you film a show, you do talk about those things. And I think that it also made it where me and Jax were fighting even more, she said, because he was so worried about that what I was saying to other people. And he says it completely makes sense because from my point of view, it seems like you guys headed into the first season of the show intent on proving that you guys had a strong marriage and that you had survived in spite of all sorts of pressures, in spite of leaving Vanderpump, in spite of the whole thing. And then he said, but I could see the fault lines. And then he said, obviously in Big Bear, things sort of erupted and it was clear that there was more than meets the eyes. And then you guys officially separated before the show even premiered. And one of the things that we like to cover on this show is conspiracy theories and the audience thinking at the time this was a promotional stunt, right? Because listen, I remember at the time there was somebody involved in the cast saying, no, this is very real to me. This is very real, said it to me. And so I was like, okay. But also I've been lied to many times from people in these casts. So like what I was just saying, you take everything with a grain of salt, but I was like, God, to the outside eye, it kind of does look like what interesting, weird timing, right? Like what weird timing when you're promoting a new show, and new shows usually don't seem to work out, or it takes a while to actually gain an audience, no matter who you are, right? It's not like Jackson Britt Takes Kentucky was like a smash hit. It wasn't. So it's not like automatically their names have this insane cachet out of the gate. You have to have so many factors line up to have a successful show. But Brittany says, I've always been honest and real on my time on Vanderpump in the Valley. Like I'm very open. I believe I'm a nice person and I'm just not a liar. So whenever people were judging my character in a way that was not true or whatever, that was really hard for me. And she says she's going through one of the hardest times in her life right now. She's got people doubting her. She says she's got people in her DMs being like, oh, we know you're just doing this. Everybody is saying that you told Jax that you're not actually going to get a divorce, that you're just doing this for the show, but you really want to get back together with him. And it's all a planned plot scheme. And Alex says, well, I'm like, this is insane. That would be a hell of a commitment to the show. Yes, but you got to understand we have been lied to in the past with these shows. So, and also just the vibe check and the temp check of this country. I mean, that's one of the things that I hate the most is just all the conspiracies, not just with reality shows across the board. And it spills off into our political system completely. So everything is conspiratorial at this time. And I mean, I do find it wild that she's getting DMs saying you're faking this because I'm like, damn, that's even almost where I draw a line. But I have a podcast to say those things, so who knows? Um, so Alex says we covered that on the show. I was looking at an internal cut of the first episode, and we cut to the exterior of your new rental at that time, and it's Brittany's fourth rental. So she's been in 4 rentals since she's moved out with Jax. And she's like, yeah, he wouldn't move out. You know, like I asked, I said, can you please move out? Me and Cruz can stay there. And he wouldn't. He just wasn't about that. He was like, this is my house, blah, blah, blah. And so Alex is like, what triggered you to move out in the first place, other than like to separate, rather, because obviously you had to move out because he wouldn't. But you said that you needed to end the cycle. What did you mean by that? And she's like, yeah, we were fighting so bad. It was toxic in our house. I didn't want my son to see that. And he doesn't deserve his parents who are fighting in front of him. And she's like, I want him to grow up in a happy house, see his mom happy, and that can change everything. I mean, Brittany, definitely, this is the right way to think about things. And she says, I remember my parents divorced when I was really little, but I still can remember times that they had arguments. And I just don't want him to remember those things. So for me, it's just very important to take him out of that situation, and me. So in normal lives, parents go through this all the time with divorce, but then imagine throwing reality TV show on top of that. I always think about this in regards to the Kardashians, with Kim saying she was keeping all of the Kanye stuff from her kids. And you just, I mean, it's maybe possible in the moment, but eventually there is this thing called the World Wide Web. And unless you got really good parental controls when these kids are in their 20s and 30s, they're going to be able to find everything. They're going to go through every Instagram post, every Reddit thread, everything. So it's all there, which is just, this is why I always say celebrities or even reality stars, not aspirational. Would you want this for some tummy tea money? Would you want this for sponsorships, right? So she said she took Cruz out of there. She had gotten a house in Malibu and stayed for like the weekend to get away once. And, she just said he wasn't leaving. So she got a rental house. All of her friends were supportive. And he said, what did you mean when you said in an interview that the show made you accountable? And she said, well, having the cameras around this season almost like puts a mirror to yourself sometimes, where I can see like, okay, I'm doing all of these things. I am talking about how bad he's been. The more I'm having to talk about it, the more I realize how crazy this relationship is and how bad it is, and I shouldn't be in it. But she says, I'm also talking with Janet about it. I'm talking with Michelle about it. And Michelle going through her own situation, right? With Dodie, everybody about it. And it's like, if I'm going through all of this and all my friends know all these details, I will be so stupid to go back in such a toxic situation, right? And though we know in our own personal lives, right, that like, even though all your friends are saying one thing, it doesn't make it like all of a sudden of like, yes, this is easy to do. No, it's still going to be the toughest thing in the world. You're almost not brainwashed, but you're conditioned to think this is the person that I love. This is the person that I want to trust, that I want to be with, that I have a son with. And so it is so hard to actually start thinking on a different path, even if you have all of these friends telling you these things. Because also, I would imagine you're like, well, all of these friends, I've seen them go through shit as well. I've seen them go through the same thing and potentially have gone back from time to time. But also, I love that because, I think, yeah, the Valley really did, like I predicted, would show that this was not healthy for either of them, right? So she says she's grateful for it. She also said her goal was to ultimately get back together eventually, but she needed to see some big changes. And she said, I wanted to see, like, if I wanted to date other people, I was very open and honest about that. It wasn't like, oh, I'm leaving. It was like, we are separated. And if I want to date other people, I will. If you want to date other people, you will. And he was potentially maybe not dating, but hooking up with people already. And then she said, we just don't need to talk about it. But I did it in a very different way. I was very quiet. I wasn't running around calling paparazzi on myself, doing all of these crazy things in public like he was. So that's something thrown at him. So anytime that he found out something about me, he just wanted to one up me and make me mad and make me upset. So just playing games with another toddler, a little reminiscent of Stassi in those first couple of seasons with that breakup and all of the information that he was lashing out with. Right. I mean, come on. You have you have Laura Lee, Justice for Laura Lee in that first season where he started banging her. And Stassi was like, you're doing that to get behind my back to get me back because I'm one of the only people that was friendly with her. I mean, that poor Laura Lee got just put through the ringer by Jax and Stassi that season. But she says, he's playing a game. Also, it's in the public eye. He would go out to eat or something. I would get pictures and people send me DMs and everything else the entire time. That's painful to see. And she said it just got really bad through the separation. And there were times whenever we might get back together and then other times where we would not talk for weeks. So it was very up and down. A lot of turmoil, a lot of change in your life. Alex Baskin says, it's great to see that you are empowered enough to do what you think is best for you and your son. She said, I never in a million years thought Jax and I would not be together forever. So I tried everything I could possibly do. But ultimately, I thought it would wake him up and make him start trying and start changing and doing the simple things I asked. I think it did the other thing where it just made him more angry and more kind of not wrestling with his demons, but like giving into his demons. We all have demons, right? We all have these things, these voices in our head that says, do this, this will make you feel good momentarily. And I think for that, it was a great empowerer of his demons. But she wanted him to go to therapy, stop partying so much, be nice to me. Isn't that wild that it's always with Brittany? It's always the be nice to me part because she said that again and again, be nice to me. She just said these were simple things. So cut to the beginning of the summer, which is the beginning of this season of The Valley, season 2. And we get into some of this, but obviously a lot of it is featured on the show itself. And we do have the entire story, Alex Baskin says. But you were in a different place when we started filming The Valley this season. And again, a lot of this is going to be covered on the show. Remember, so something happens in the beginning of this season that eventually leads to Jax being asked to or willingly going to this mental health facility / rehab facility. So Brittany saying how hard she tried to not have any of these blowups happen. But it was just too much. And he was actually spiraling and getting worse throughout their separation. So like I said, it did the opposite. He was going to all these appearances and all these nights out and just doing all these things and the girls and the drinking and the partying. It was constant. And I was in a different place and she had just hit her limit, she says. So she also says, oh, he's acting like he's having a midlife crisis or something. Like it's crazy. Everything just got way worse. And then a horrible blow up happened 2 days before we started filming. And I was done at that point. I was completely done because it was just so bad. And I will say a week or a week and a half before that, we were even talking about me moving back into the house. So that's how close they came to actually working things out. So Alex said, you seem to have a different resolve at that point. You seemed like your outlook was different. And she said, yeah, I just like shut off at that point. It was too much. It's not like that was an isolated incident. He's had these blow ups sporadically over the years before I had Cruz. And after I've had Cruz, I mean, people have seen things on Vanderpump Rules. They saw how things were in Big Bear, but he had blow ups. He's got a huge temper. He's got a big ego and he, has all of these blow ups, but throughout the separation, it all got worse and it was all escalating. And she says she had dealt with this so many years, so she was used to it. And she tried to do everything possible to make that marriage work. And she says it makes her proud, happy to know that, that she tried to make it work. And she was there for him through thick and thin, stood by his side, even whenever he cheated on me, lied to me, threw me under the bus. I always tried to have his back. Now, unfortunately for Jax, there is 9 filmed seasons of evidence with a lot of this behavior on camera. But she says, I was constantly having to apologize for him, having to make excuses for him. And it's kind of a relief that I don't have to do that anymore. There is this relief you get when you're out of a relationship that is toxic for both of you. There is this relief where, okay, this is the worst possible outcome. But at the same time, we're not doing these things to each other. There's a little bit of an exhale, maybe, kind of. But she says, I was always connected to it because he was my husband. Even if I wasn't the one that said or the one that did the thing, I was still connected to it. They've been together since 2015. And she said, yeah, there was cheating and there was volatility in the relationship. Alex says there was cheating, there was volatility in the relationship. And when you guys got married, I can tell you everyone around you was saying the same thing, which is we hope it works out, but we're concerned. And she's like, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people thought I was crazy for going through with the marriage and everything, but it was just, I was so madly in love with him that I looked over a lot that he did to me. I was kind of like blinded in many ways because I'm a forgiving person. Um, and they talk about that being a good quality and a bad quality. And a lot of things slide because Jax would do is he would blow up, get mad. You'd give him 30 minutes and then he's fine. And he would just act like nothing ever happened and we would just go our merry little way. But actually, all the years of me doing that, like that messes with the person. I was just like putting things away, putting things away, putting things away instead of like making him make changes. So it's like when what's her name on that season of Potomac? I always bring up this example, and it's such a throwaway scene in that Candace Monique season. But Monique said, I'm putting all of these things in a box on the shelf. But what happens when one day that box falls over, or you're going to have to deal with everything that you put away in that box? I think a lot of people feel that way, right? When everything is in that box, the box is eventually going to tip over and everything's going to break free. And then what, right? Because you have to deal with all of this shit that you've been, just putting up with or dealing with, anything like that. So she says, I think even throughout our whole separation, he never thought that I would actually leave. But she says, yeah, I thought I would, but it was hard for me. I did not make the decision to get a divorce. I did not take that lightly at all. She says, I'm just too hurt. I can't look past a lot of things. He says, one thing that you've always said you've been gracious about is that he's a great and loving dad. Brittany has always defended Jax as a dad. And she's like, yeah, I've always thought that as angry, as mad as I am at him, because I'm still so angry and so mad at him, that's going to take me so long to get over, but he loves Cruz. He is a great father and he'll do anything for him. So I think that is very nice and very gracious of Brittany to say, and hopefully that is the truth, right? And she says, and I know even if I had to call him right now needing something, he would still be there for me. He would show up, and that's all I'm trying to focus on right now. Well, this is before all these podcasts came out, right? She says, we're not going to be together. That's not happening anymore. People keep being like, oh, you got 15 more years. And I'm like, no, this will be the rest of my life. So at some point, I'm going to try my hardest to get to where I'm not so angry, but I'm doing such a good job with co-parenting. Even him being over this morning in front of Cruz, daddy's there. Everything is fine in front of him. It's just all the stuff that I've been having to deal with internally. That's really hard. And so he says, well, Jax is stabilized. He got a place right next to Tom Schwartz's new place. And Brittany's like, it just makes me so mad. It makes me so mad. Again, I have a rental that I had to pay up front. Yeah, I mean, that's going to piss Brittany off. So he's like, whenever I found out that he signed a lease behind my back, didn't talk to me about it, nothing, and he was living in the home, wouldn't let me have the house. I'm paying thousands and thousands of dollars to stay in these rentals. And then he ups and signs a lease without me knowing. And then lo and behold, it's right next door to Tom Schwartz. I was just like, I was angry. Not because I didn't want him out of the house. I wanted him out of the house, but he knew I had paid upfront for a rental all the way up until October 31st. So that's me wasting 2 months of money that I could be putting towards the house or be putting towards their son, right? And she's like, he just doesn't even think about me at all whenever he was doing these things. He should have waited until I was out of the rental and then moved into a place. Us guys, we have pudding for brains sometimes, right? I don't even think that was vindictive. I think that was Jax just thinking of himself. So he makes me waste all this money. I was still paying all the bills, taking care of 2 households, taking care of groceries for both houses, doing all the things. God, was she still paying for food for Jax to eat? Anyways, and she says, and then poor Schwartz. Oh, poor Schwartz. Tom is like devastated, but I'm sure he's not devastated. He's happy that Jax is there, I'm sure. But at the same time, Tom is so worried that he's going to get dragged into another scandal situation because he's like, I don't think he was actually going to move next door to me. He just can't win for losing. I love Schwartz having PTSD. Having putsta. You've got putsta, PTSD. Can you imagine that? Oh my goodness. PTSD. Damn. God, there's something intrinsically funny about Schwartz. Like, I mean, it's not funny, but of like, I don't want another scandal, and now you move right next door to me. So she says she doesn't even want to know where the place is. I don't want to see it for a while. And she says she's still paying all the bills at the house. I mean, you know what then they're like, I mean, you know what he did. And they're like, should I say it? And then we're like, we're going to hold on to that. So he did something that'll be revealed during the season. But they say he did more. He did even worse things. That's the reason why I'm so mad about the condo, is because he just screwed me over so bad. Man, Jax is going to have potentially one of the worst seasons of his life. Thankfully, he's had so many other horrible seasons which he still makes great TV. I don't want to mince words. He does. He's fascinating to watch, but he probably is a little more used to having a bad season than most. But this is wild. It seems very unfair that she had to stay at a rental. He says, so you think you face the consequences for his actions? And she's like, yeah, constantly. It's very unfair to me. So he's like, okay, I want to zoom out and I want to talk about the Valley versus Vanderpump Rules. It's colored by a different time in your life. The situation is different when you're married and then going through a separation. You know what I like about this podcast too, or what I find interesting, is that it's done by this executive producer. So it almost, if you're a super geek like me, it kind of gives you a peek inside even Mr. Baskin's mind and potentially how he works as a producer. This is potentially how they handle like talking head interviews during the season. You're thinking about like, okay, let's zoom out. Let's think about this. Let's think about that. So I think this, for me, this is something that I geek out on and I pay very close attention to, because you're like, okay, this is how these shows are made. These are the questions you want to know, right? So he says, you have a child, you're older, you're more mature, but what is it like on a whole? How would you say that your experience on the show is different than the first show? It's like, it's a lot different. The main thing, the mom thing, we have so much more invested because it's our lives, our marriages, our families, our children. Whenever we were on Vanderpump Rules, we were just bartenders and servers and going out drinking and having fun. But now I think our problems are much more real and they mean a lot more. So that's the biggest difference to me. Vanderpump Days was a little more just like having fun and partying. Yeah, I mean, it's so true. And as you get older, I mean, you guys know, I mean, things do take on this serious tinge, whether it be family dying, whether it be your own health deteriorating, finances, kids, so many other things that you really, all of the things that your families told you when you were younger of like, oh, get ready, get ready. You really see how truthful those sentiments are, but you don't pay attention because you feel like you're going to live forever. You feel like you have the beauty of youth to back you up, right? But she just says, yeah, the stakes are so much higher. And she's like, oh, in 2015, when I started at social media, I think I had like 4,000 followers or something. It's completely different ball game now. He says you were defined by being Jax's girlfriend and then his wife. And now we're seeing Brittany Cartwright as a fully grown woman. And she's like, yeah, I've gotten a lot stronger. Everything that I've been through the past 10 years, I'm a lot stronger. I'm standing up for myself. I'm proud of myself. Now that one of the storylines that comes up this season, Alex says, is because you were friends with basically everyone. Sometimes you were accused of just being in the middle and not taking a side. What do you think about that? And she's like, I definitely do that. I'm very aware that I do that. So she admits to her faults, which I think most reality stars do not. She says she's super close to Janet. She's super close to Kristen, which is interesting because Janet and Kristen, unless something changes in the second season, were not very close, right? And she even says they don't like each other. They're not constantly talking about each other to me. I try to make things better. That's good because you don't want that. You don't want to throw that stress on Brittany as well. She says, I'm always trying to bring people back together, but I don't think it's necessarily my job to always stick my nose in it, which can be hard to be that character in a reality show of the bridge builder or mediator, as it were. But she says she doesn't have the capacity to bring on everybody's drama 24/7. And there's another thing. They know that I'm going through so much and they don't want to bring all the drama to my front door. But I also don't want it to be like that I'm not being like the best friend because they're not bringing me things. You know what I mean? Like I still want to be able to be there for my friends. I've always been in the middle, even my friends back home in Kentucky. I'm the person whenever I come into town, that's when they all got together. It's just who I've always been, really. And Alex says, I just feel bad for you. I know the shit that you'll take. If you do like a post, if you don't like a post, you can't win. God, that's what I'm saying. Social media is even so different. So us Hawkeyes out here, not me, but like other accounts, which I learned from, they'll like, oh, this person liked this post or this comment. And that shit really does get to them. They can't just brush it off. I'm pretty good at not disassociating, but I'm pretty good at I'll feel things very deeply, and I think that can be one of my greatest strengths and one of my greatest weaknesses, but at the same time, if I feel like I can I will not I will try not to torture myself because I'm already tortured. That's already just what it's in my DNA since I was a kid, but I will try not to make it worse on myself. Like I won't, like I don't know sometimes what the point of that is if you're trying to just survive, right? But she says she's more of a fixer than a fighter. She says she's been partners with Jax's bar. So the partners came to me and asked if I wanted to take over a Culver City location and turn it into Brits. And I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. Jax apparently told them they weren't allowed to ask me for like a whole month, and they kept being like, we're going to ask her, we're going to ask her. So finally he was like, okay, whatever. And she says, I did so much for Jax's. Like, I did so much, and I didn't care that it was called Jax's. I didn't care about any of that stuff. I was supported, like, and they wanted to do this with me now, and now I'm taking over West Hollywood. So she says, on October 4th, I'm going in and starting with my interior designer, and we're starting to redecorate and stuff because what is this? It's November, November 13th. So she's taking over a side of Rocco's, which we've talked about on this past Monday's show already. And the other Jax's Saloon is on the side of another Rocco's in the Valley. So that will be funny. You'll probably see Bar Wars at some point on season 3 of the Valley, which I was really hoping that they would film 2 and 3 the seasons consecutively or back to back, as it were. And she says, Jax is like, I want everyone to know that I'm a part of this. I'm like, you have no say in anything. All you were able to say was you can finally ask her because you was throwing a fit about it. You can finally, I think that maybe that's Alex saying that. She says, you took over Jax's this season. That's the thing, is if you start to catalog what happened this season, and I'll lead into the question about this season, but there's just so much. So I think what happens is that Brittany takes over Jax's Saloon in the Valley while he is in his mental health facility, right? And we even have pictures where they redesigned and like put Brits everywhere, the name, Brit. She's like, we would get field notes every day about the show, and it's like the most dense reading because there's a million developments going on at the same time. So field notes, you guys, what podcast was it? They broke down the creative process for these shows, or at least how they did it on Vanderpump, was that, for everything they filmed that day, one of the producers or people would like write down everything that happened. They would field notes it, and then that would go to the producers and stuff. So you would catch up on everything they got on camera that day. So Alex is saying there was so much, there was too much to keep up with, which is exciting for the reality show viewers. She says the one thing in the Valley and Vanderpump have in common is the strength of relationships. Also, remember, with these bars, Jax and Brittany don't put any money in. They are using their name, and I'm sure I would love to know the percentages, but it's a kind of a nice business strategy to say, okay, we know this will be on TV. We know people know these people. So it's immediate publicity for this bar. It's also helping Rocco's, the other bar. It keeps that business coming in because they're right next to each other. And it's not a lot of financial risk for Jax or Brittany. She says, talked about the boys chat. The boys chat actually started from Tom and Katie's wedding. It started with Tom Schwartz's groomsmen, and then they just kept adding people in over the years. So now there's like 25 guys that are in on this chat. Oh my God, can somebody add me to this guys chat? Guys chat, guys night, guys chat. Can you imagine being one of these 25 dudes? You got to that's hard to trust 25. I don't even trust 2 people. Trusting 25 people? Holy shit. This is like the holy grail. I'm not a hacker, but anyways, they said there is a mole. And they don't know who the mole is. And then they said, I don't think there's just one mole in that group. There's multiple moles or multiple girlfriends or wives who look through their husband's phone. Everybody does that. It's not a surprise. And she's like, did you used to look through Jax's phone? And she's like, oh gosh, yeah. I had all his passwords. I was logged on to his Instagram accounts. I still think Jax is smarter than that though. But she says he had mine too. Now she's changed every single password, even Netflix, Hulu, Peacock. I changed all the passwords, kicked him off. So Jax has to steal somebody else's Peacock now. Wonder if Bravo gives him a discount. And anyway, she's like, oh yeah, I checked everything. He's got a burner account. And they're like, yeah, obviously. He's always going to be like that. Even though he was in a mental health facility for 30 days, he's still going to act like he did everything. And Alex is like, well, we are who we are. So he says, do you have any interest in getting out there and dating? And she's like, yeah, I think I deserve to be treated nicely and have fun. And like, that will help me. I definitely need to heal. I'm not trying to be in a relationship. I have a boyfriend, not trying to be in a relationship, have a boyfriend right now, but flirting and getting attention is just having fun. I need that. And they're like, are we going to get your brat summer next season? And she's like, oh yeah, I'm excited. What was the most surprising thing to you about this season of The Valley? And she was like, I was so happy Luke and Kristen got engaged. I'm so excited. I didn't know about it. So I was going to be butthurt at first, but I'm so happy for them. That was a surprise because I wasn't aware of it. Other than that, I think like in my own life, me actually going through and filing was kind of a surprise because I wasn't sure when I was going to do it and how I was going to do it. So she says she filed the divorce, which I think Jax contradicts her in his interview with Alex, right? You seem to have a different resolve, want to get ahead of things. And she was like, I was just in there talking to my lawyer while I was sitting there because I was just in there to interview and see if I liked the lawyer I wanted to work with. It wasn't even I was going in there 100% to file. It was just let me have a meeting, see what I need to do to protect myself in a kind of situation. And then I was like, I have to do this now before I back out, before he gets out of the mental health facility and pulls me back in. I have to do it while I'm feeling strong, while I'm so angry. I just got to get it done. And he's like, because you were concerned otherwise that you would end up feeling bad for him and he would come out and he'd be especially nice to you. Yeah. And pull me back in, she says, because he's been able to do that for 10 years. So I have to go through it with it now and have to be strong. And I have to stay strong from here on out. And then Alex says, well, basically what you're saying is that he was the same, but you were different. And she's like, yeah, I don't feel like he's changed at all in those 30 days in the mental health facility. And the reason, I'm sure it'll be on the show as well, but a lot of rage texting and stuff was still going on the entire time that I was in rehab, which, by the way, me and Sheena, I don't know if this will make the show, talk about this on Shenanigans, right? We talk about that she was witness to one of these rage texts that he was giving her from the mental health facility, from the rehab, right? And she said, so if you're in therapy 7 hours a day and you're still finding time to call me names and cuss me out and send me rage text, then you're obviously not ever going to change. That is so sad. It's just, that's sad, man. Yeah. Anyways, they talk about her friends killing her if she went back on, her promises to not be with Jax. She says, my mom, you'll see her this season. I'm sure she's always been such a Team Jax person. And after she saw everything that happened leading up to this season, she's like, no, you need to get away. And for her to say that is a big deal. We covered this in the show, but what about the claim that you were dating Jax's friend and you guys had an explicit no dating in the friend group policy? And she says, we did not have a no dating in the friend group policy. I love policies that are created in friend groups. We never spoke about that because why would we? I didn't even think, first off, I didn't think I was going to hook up with this friend. It wasn't anything like I was like, oh, I'm for sure. Yeah, it wasn't planned. I wasn't trying to go after one of his friends. That's not how it happened. When we had said, is nobody around Cruz and nobody at our home that we own together and I still pay the bills for, that all my photos and my furniture and everything I own is still at that house and my son stays there. Just please don't have girls at the house. Those were the two rules. And I don't know if he had anybody around Cruz, but he definitely had people at my house because I caught him both times. And only 2 times that I caught him. I'm sure there were other times, but I caught him twice. And I was like, man. And he says that whole situation factored into the bad blow up that ultimately led you to, and she's like, yeah, I think that me hooking up with his friend, it wasn't like I said, it wasn't planned, but also it was somebody that I felt like I knew. And in our world, it's so crazy because how do you trust people? And I was single for the first time in my life. It's another weird thing about my life that my whole LA story has been with Jax and on camera pretty much. So I'm never lived in LA without Jax. So this is also a new thing for me, but I wanted wherever I did start hanging out with him, it was because it was somebody that I knew. I always thought he was hot. And also I was just so mad at Jax. So I didn't care if I hurt his feelings about that. Why should I care? He never cared about how he hurt my feelings for years. He put me down. He did so much to me. So it's I'm sorry that you're upset about who it is, but at the same time, you didn't give me attention, affection, or anything for years, made my confidence this big. So I was like, you know what? This guy's really hot. And he's like, yeah, you're taking care of yourself. Yeah, taking care of myself. And Jax has no leg to stand on. He hooked up with my friend. And they're like, let's all remember that. And I'm sure Kristen, Stassi, they've had history. He's done it to other friends. He has no leg to stand on. And then he goes, are you on dating apps? She's like, no, I've never been on a dating app before. I don't think that I'm ready. I know I was I could tell that guy was flirting with me and I was always flirting with him. He's very much my type. And I just kind of flirting through DMs one time. And I was just like, come over, sliding the DMs. So, and then Alex is like, let's say that you end up meeting the right guy, right? Are you open to getting married? Are you open to having kids? What do you think it looks like? And she's like, I'm open to anything. I've always wanted more kids. Do I know? Do I think I want more kids? Not really. If it happens, it happens, that kind of thing. I'm just going to take everything as it goes. I don't even know if I would ever get legally married again. After seeing what I have to go through right now with the divorce and stuff, I would definitely sign a prenup. There would be a lot of things that would be different. God, I wonder what the prenup is with them, right? It's just brutal to think about. Anyways, Alex says, I think you're going to meet someone who has 6 kids of their own and you're going to be a stepmom. And she's like, I think that I would want to be with somebody that has a kid so that they understand. Just Britt, all I'm asking you, don't go on 90 Day Fiance at any point. Don't that always seems to be bad, right? They're talking about Michelle's story and how scary that was, and she filed a long ago, but they can't agree on anything. So even that divorce is hard, which I'm sure we will see in season 2 of The Valley. Um, she also then goes on to say, or Alex says, here's a burning question. We're sitting here right now, but when was your relationship with the production and the Bravo in jeopardy? When were you considering just walking off the show? And Brittany says, well, so one of the times that I got really upset was when it was after Jax cheated on me and we were like trying to figure out if we were going to be together, what was going to happen. And he tried to act like he was breaking up with me on camera. I don't know if you remember that. Was that the Faith thing? It was like I was packing up and he was like, I just think that you deserve better, something like that. And I got so mad because we just had this conversation. I think we had like slept together again that day. And then as soon as the cameras come, he acted like he was breaking up with me. And I was so shocked because that had not been how he had been acting, how we were talking, anything. He just like did it whenever the cameras come on. That is so, I mean, it's very much reminiscent of Sandoval's New York Times interview he did like, what, a year ago, where he talks about like, just how he looks at life and everything's content. And it's really, really dark. And Jax is a master manipulator. He's one of the best to do it. Right. But that is wild. And I bet sometimes Jax throws in her face of like, I got you this life. And yeah, probably. But is it that much to brag about? Like you also did it through trauma, like, yeah, you got this life now, but you had to deal with a lot of trauma for it. I wonder if he's going to ask for those boobs back. So she was like, I was upset. Jax was calling me a million times over and over. I don't really want to break up. Where did you go? Where did you go? He's calling me. Please don't leave. I don't want to break up. So I was angry with him. I stayed at that hotel and did not tell production, would not tell Jeremiah, our friend, Jerry, producer Jerry, would not tell anybody where I was staying because I was just so angry. And then eventually, once I cooled off, I was able to talk to them and do all that stuff. And they figured out where I was. I was so mad at Jax. I don't think you had any other walk-offs or near walk-offs, Alex said. Like, I can't remember with the reunion or anything. This is why we need, after Vanderpump Rules is done, I need to write the authorized tell-all of an oral history of Vanderpump Rules because I want to know who else has threatened to walk off or has walked off. They are talking about, they're like, Kristen wins the walk-offs. Kristen walked off a lot. And they're like, yeah, she's big on the walk-offs. I would say Kristen and Jax probably lead the league in walk-offs. Kristen even more than Jax. Jax has done it many times, but I think Kristen, and they're like, she's going to take your mic off too. Yeah, she's going to throw it away. We're done. And they're kind of laughing about that. So she's like, oh, we need a second to cool off. We're so grateful for what we get to do, but there's a lot of pressure that comes with it. It's just a mind fuck of a situation. So she says, life's up and down, just a roller coaster. The whole season was crazy, but it's still not even touching how crazy this season is. And on a scale of 1 to 10, that was a 2 the first season, and this season's an 8. And she's like, even that season where everything happened, where I found out he cheated, where I played the recording, where, just so much happened that entire season, it still doesn't compare to what's coming on the Valley. Damn, this is going to be a good. I mean, I hate that we're so conditioned to be like, man, this sounds just god awful and tragic. Gonna be a good season. I don't know. She talks about many moments that she wishes she could do over, but she was just being real in the moment. She's a normal person. She's gonna blow up sometimes. She's gonna get angry. She isn't a shrinking violet. And God, the interview is starting to wind down here. She says she can't read Google alerts. I can't look at Reddit. I don't look at articles for myself. God, same, Britt. Just stay that way, girl. Stay that way. And he said there's a wrong takeaway. And I think if you try to play to the commenters, they're not going to like you anyway. So you just have to accept yourself, mistakes and all, and move on. The majority of the time, it's in my comments. Some bull crap under my picture. Other people go and fight with them anyway. And then they're going to fight in my comments. Yeah, that's the worst, right? And I guess it just goes with the territory. She said, I got used to it with the podcast because he started getting all sorts of hate, or I'm apparently to blame for the ruin of Vanderpump Rules or whatever. I always say that even Jesus Christ could have an Instagram and he's still going to get hate in his comments. I mean, that's wild. When you think about, I was like, if Jesus came back, do you think first off, they would even believe it's Jesus? And second off, do you think he would just be like, I don't like that guy. Like it would, it's rough out here for everybody. Said there's other things happening too this season. Michelle and Jesse, Kristen and Luke, Nia, Danny, Janet, Zach. There's a lot going on. It's never ending. It's exhausting. It's nonstop. All of the words they keep going, talking about space will do Brittany good. And that is kind of the end of that. So listen, I got to do a Salt Lake recap now. But what I'm going to do, because Jax's interview, of course, I don't know how to do anything small. I thought I would be like, oh, a quick 30-minute recap, but I got really fascinated with it. I'll do the Jax one later and I'll put it up on the Patreon. Patreon.com/, so bad it's good. For the baddies out there, a little something special because this lasted an hour. But thank you guys for being here. I hope you had, I learned something. I mean, there's a lot of juicy information here. So I cannot wait to dive into the Jax one. I will talk to you guys every flipping day for the rest of your lives. Bye.